Okay, right then. Leila, it'd be amazing if we could get started with just a little bit of your journey into the world of veganism. What's kind of brought you here?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, first of all. Well, I actually went vegan in June 2014, and I did it for the animals. And although I keep telling people that, I went vegan overnight, which is true, I did it really overnight. But at the same time, when I look back, I realized that it was actually a more gradual process. Firstly, I should mention that I actually grew up not liking animals. I mean, my family still comments on that. My brother says, you didn't like to even touch cats, and now you live with dogs and cats. So, and it is interesting. I mean, when I look at the kind of childhood pictures, I see there's a picture of me and a dog when I was like 2, 3 years old. And I remember we had a cat when I was a child. So there were actually animals, kind of in my life when I was little, but I still didn't like them. And I remember, my cousins would actually kind of play with me, and they wanted to they had cats. They would kind of bring their cats in front of my face, and I would kind of run away. So I you could say, I grew up not wanting to think of animals. Let's put it that way. So, almost as if, animals didn't exist. And then when I went to medical school, and it was in my first year that we had to dissect a human arm. And I remember I looked at these muscle fibers in front of me, and I thought, gosh, that looks very much like the meat I eat, which, I eat in my meals. And it kind of freaked me out to eat something that could have been human flesh. So that is when I went vegetarian. Again, not for the animals, just simply because I thought it was too gross. But most people, I thought, eating meat is the normal thing to do. So for a long time, I would actually force myself to have meat because I wanted to be normal, like the rest of the people. And later, I met a group of professional martial artists, and they were either vegetarian or pescatarian. And I do martial arts myself. And I was so inspired by them. They were professional martial artists, winning competitions, and they weren't eating meat as such. And so I thought, maybe, I don't need to worry about being normal. I could actually do something which seemed, to me at the time, not normal. So I went fully vegetarian. And I don't know how other vegetarians feel about meat, but for me, not eating meat actually made me lose the taste for animal products. And I realized that I wasn't even enjoying eggs anymore. I could have eggs when it was hidden in cakes, biscuits, or quiche and stuff like that, but not eggs on their own. So gradually, I was actually losing the taste for animal products, I guess. But I was still having dairy, products and cheese and yogurt. So that was part of my diet. Then in 2013, I got involved with animal rescue, and I remember a few fellow rescuers would ask me, you care for animals, so why are you not vegan? And I thought, what are they talking about? I'm not harming any animals. I'm vegetarian. And then one day I watched a video, and I learned the truth about dairy industry. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. We don't make the connection that if a cow is producing milk, there must be a baby cow somewhere. We just don't make the connection that milk kind of comes after there is a baby. But once I knew that, I just couldn't have milk anymore. I couldn't have cheese and all these dairy products. So that's it. Then I did go vegan, kind of then and there. And I have never looked back. And as most vegans say, it was the best decision I have ever made, actually. So I'm really glad.
Wow. That's fascinating, going back to dissecting a human arm was the sort of, if we chart it right back, was the beginning of it. And then and I'm also fascinated by somebody who is in the sort of, the world of medical professionals, training, and that's how it just sort of strikes me how deep the dissonance goes, that even somebody in that world, so highly trained, etc., hasn't necessarily made that milk connection, and then that comes along later. It's fascinating.
Exactly, and it is interesting because I was actually trained to become a pediatrician. So for me, I was dealing with children, with, neonates. So I should have made that connection that actually milk is produced after a mother has given birth to a baby. And you know, you kind of feel stupid, to be honest,
Mm.
that like kind of it, you just take it for so granted, you know,
Yeah.
that dairy is different, that we are supposed to have dairy. Like kind of, you know, you never actually make that connection. Why? We are the only mammals who are still having the milk of somebody else, another mammal actually, you know, after when we are grown up. So yes.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating to me. But then, but you know, I think we've all felt that moment of feeling a little bit silly that, you know, what? How did I not realize? You know, I think that's quite normal when you've been through this kind of journey. But I think it just shows, doesn't it, just how deep it is, and the fact that you know, the fact we label them dairy cows and so on is even that is saying that's their purpose. You know, that is what they're here for. That they're bred for this. So it's, you know, I don't think it's you know, too on you for for not having thought about it. I think we've all been through that moment. Absolutely. I'm also fascinated in your journey by a group of martial artists as well, having this inspirational moment for you. Obviously, some pescatarian, some vegetarian, and so on, but certainly at planting a seed. Were you kind of quite actively involved? You mentioned you're a martial artist. Were you quite actively involved in health and fitness back then?
Oh, yes.
And
I have
yeah.
always loved fitness. I have always been very active and martial arts. I used to do karate. So the group of martial artists I met at the time, they're actually karateka. So they were doing karate at the time. I mean, now I do kung fu. That has changed. But for me, being fit was very important. But again, it is interesting. I never thought of having or needing protein to be fit. So
Right.
that never crossed my mind. So it just shows how little of nutrition I knew, that I never actually thought that I needed actually protein to kind of be fit and strong. But I thought eating meat was normal because everybody else was doing that. So if I wanted to be
Yes.
normal, I had to do the same. And I remember I used to go out with my colleagues, with, you know, other doctors, and because I had lost the taste for meat, I would, you know, order the vegetarian dish, and they would tell me like, no, you can't have vegetarian, you know, you have to have meat. So it was almost like kind of, you know, I didn't want to be an outsider. So sometimes
Yeah.
I would cave in and say, okay, fine, I'll have some meat, but I wasn't really enjoying it anymore. But again, it is just so ingrained in us that eating meat is normal. Everybody is doing it. So nobody actually questioned that. And being vegetarian, I mean, for me now, it's like kind of, you know, obviously being vegetarian is not even enough. But
Yeah.
at the time, people were questioning me, why are you vegetarian?
Yeah, absolutely. That bit as well, I'd love to get your take on. When you went through your medical training, and obviously you're associating with other doctors and so on, and like you say, socializing with them and all this kind of stuff. What was the training like from a nutritional perspective? You know, what was there much nutritional training in your experience?
No, first of all, I have to say I actually studied in Vienna, Austria, but I'm sure it is the same here in the UK. What I have heard from other colleagues, it is the same. No, not a lot, not at all. I mean, I would say zero. It was
Wow.
whatever we learned was so little that, and the focus wasn't on that. And it is the same with lifestyle factors. You know, we now talk about, you know, lifestyle factors like kind of stress and, I don't know, having social connections and all these things playing a huge role on our health. And at the time, we would mention it, but we wouldn't actually delve into it.
Right.
And we wouldn't even actually start thinking, okay, what can we do against that? It was always
Yeah.
like kind of, what medication can we give? You know, it
Yeah.
was always more about the medications, what medications would help with this and that. So the focus was completely different. So I guess no matter how much nutrition education I had, it was so little, and it wasn't just the focus of the education, you know.
I'm gonna try and word this question right correctly, but I've spoken to a few doctors, but this question hasn't necessarily popped into my mind until I've just spoken to you now, and I'd love to get your perspective on it. So, if, like you say, there's not been a huge amount of nutritional training, but you know, we all know the length of time that somebody has to go through to, you know, become medically qualified. You know, it's an enormous amount of education and tons of learning and so on and so forth. Do you think what do you put it down? I think, what do you put it down to that there isn't that nutritional training? Because I think the obvious thing, and the kind of the leftist in me says this is big pharma. You know, this is the big pharmaceuticals having their influence over medical training and so on. So they want everybody to be medicated rather than. But something just popped into my mind, which was, and maybe I thought about it because of COVID and the pressure on the NHS and these kind of things that we hear. Do you think there's an element of it's also from a pure dealing with the amount of numbers that a GP has to see, say, or a doctor in a hospital? There's a bit of we haven't really got time to get involved in the lifestyle because those things would take longer to fix, or is that too nicer analysis of it? If that made sense as a question.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And I would say yes and no, but definitely a nicer way of putting it. Because I think it is just the way we think is differently. You know?
Right.
It is, the approach is completely different. I mean, now that I'm a nutritionist, my approach is the exact opposite of what I was thinking
Right.
as a doctor. So, and it is difficult for me to remember how it was, but I remember lifestyle. I mean, we do ask like kind of questions. It was like kind of history, like kind of social history, but it was more like kind of, of family history. It was more like kind of, did anybody else in your family have the same condition? It wasn't like kind of, do you have loving people around you? Do you have like kind of, or it wasn't like kind of, where do you live? Or does anybody else in your kind of environment smoke? It wasn't like that. It was, I don't know, it was part of the questions we would ask, but not to that degree. And it wouldn't actually play a huge role when we were going to kind of come up with a treatment plan. And definitely nutrition wasn't something, kind of to discuss. And also I think there is a lack of understanding of the role of nutrition in mainstream, kind of medicine, if you want to call it that way. And what I see is that sometimes doctors who are not trained in nutrition, they just really take whatever is said in the media, again in the mainstream media, and they go with that rather than doing their own research, their own kind of reading and education. So, and that is kind of dangerous because they perpetuate the myth, like kind of, you should eat this for iron, for example, you need to have red meat if you have iron deficiency. So it is, I guess, we really need, the change needs to happen at universities, at colleges. That is where the real change needs to happen, because other doctors, they are far too much into their practice, like kind of, old-fashioned way of doing things. And there are some who do change when they learn from their, they learn about their new research. But it is more difficult to get to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a fascinating subject. I could every time I speak to somebody about it, I want to ask that question because their perspectives are always kind of unique and really interesting. So thank you for that. It set me off on a different path, but a very interesting one nonetheless. Just to sort of move forward then. So from your training as a in the traditional kind of medical sense, your doctor's training. At what point did the nutrition side of things come into focus for you? Do you remember there being a point where you thought, I need to go on a journey myself here to understand this stuff?
Yes, there was a moment, but I should have mentioned that I actually, I had some health problems. I used to suffer from chronic migraine, and I had really horrible migraines. Like I'm talking about, I had to spend 18 days in bed with pain. So I had actually to quit my medical career because of that. I just couldn't continue. Which was, a difficult decision for me. Obviously, I had gone through the training and I really wanted to do that, and especially pediatrics was something I was really passionate about. But looking back again, I don't really like to say that, but it was like a blessing in disguise. Because once I gave up medicine, I became a personal trainer because, of my own interest in fitness. But also, people keep saying fitness and exercise like preventive medicine. And when I went vegan and I was a personal trainer, people kept asking me the one question: where do you get your protein? And as I told you, I didn't know anything about nutrition, but I had to answer to people. I had to give them a good answer. So I started educating myself, and that again kind of pushed me on a different journey, or just a continuation of the journey I had started as when I went vegan. And I learned about nutrition, about a vegan diet, and then I learned about a whole food plant-based diet, which is I like to call it a healthy vegan diet. And that really literally saved my life, because I actually cured my migraines with that.
Wow.
And I have written and spoken about my migraine story actually many times. And each time I talk about it, I feel this huge relief, but also this disbelief, because the answer, the solution was so easy. All I had to do was change my food. And I feel like, I spent so many years in pain. I lost my career in medicine because of my migraines. And I just wish somebody would have told me about the whole food plant-based diet earlier. And that is actually when I decided, when I cured my migraines, I thought, okay, I have to share that with as many people as possible. But, I always also wanted to have that kind of like the credibility. So I went back to university and I got a master's degree in nutrition. Yes, and that's how I actually changed to to a nutritionist, because I felt, yes, there is a need for it. And yes, I just thought, if I can just help a few people like myself who were suffering, from chronic diseases for years, if I can help them to make the transition and to change their lives, then that would be a good thing.
Wow. But just to really kind of spell it out for folks who might not necessarily understand the difference, you talk about the whole food plant-based versus kind of other vegan diets. What specifically did you take on from a dietary perspective that helped you cure those migraines? What did a typical day's eating look like?
Well, initially when I did that, I was desperate, The whole thing started when I learned about the whole food plant-based diet, and I heard all these stories of people, curing the cancers on this diet. And I thought, okay, cancer is such a disease, we are all afraid of it. So if they can actually do it, then my migraine should, maybe there is a hope for me. So anyway, so when I started doing it, I did it very extreme. So I don't want to talk about that diet, that initial diet I was having, because it was more out of desperation. But, a vegan diet, obviously no animal products, no dairy, no meat, no eggs, no fish. So we know that. But the whole food plant-based diet is also like, it's about having whole foods in their natural forms, so not processed or minimal processing. Minimal processing means like kind of, if you have potatoes in your garden, you cannot eat them like that. You need to kind of steam them, boil them, or do something with them. So that is the minimal processing. Or certain foods, if you powder spices, that is minimal processing. But we are talking about highly processed foods, like kind of white bread, white pasta, where they have actually removed parts of that food, and with that you have also removed nutrients. So that's why I call it a healthy vegan diet. So it is still vegan, but you don't have any junk food. So none of those vegan ice creams and vegan cheeses you can buy out there. So yes.
As you mentioned them, and for people who listen regularly, they'll know I ask about this quite a lot, because I'm always kind of being pushed and pulled by, with the value of those kind of products, those kind of vegan junk foods, if you like. But I'd love to get your perspective on them. That the scale of damage compared to eating an omnivorous diet. Do you think it's comparable? Do you think it's marginally better, but still something we need to watch out for? What's your kind of view on them?
Well, it depends on how much of those foods you have, and if you are kind of vegan, not veganish. If you're vegan and you're still enjoying those foods on occasions, then that's fine. And again, if you're not suffering from a chronic disease like I was, then you are going to get away with it. Whereas I have met people who are, were suffering from a chronic disease. It could have been migraine or chronic fatigue syndrome or rheumatoid arthritis. Then they had to really kind of follow 100% whole food plant-based diet. So it really depends on your overall health. But in my opinion, it is probably slightly better because, but then again, a lot of vegan cheeses, for example, they have coconut oil, and coconut oil is saturated fat. So, by ditching animal products which have saturated fat and you're replacing it, with a lot of coconut oil, for example, then you're still getting saturated fat. So it depends on how much you have and what kinds of kind of vegan junk food you have. So it really depends. And I think I do appreciate those products, I have to say, because they make it easier for people to transition to a vegan or even to a whole food plant-based diet. Because when food is actually a very emotional thing for most of us. We associate, memories with food, like, oh yes, my granny used to make that. So food is more than just, energy that we get, there is a lot of history actually in each food we eat. So I think it's good to have those products which are similar to, the ones you used to have. That makes it easier for, people to transition. So I think as such, they are really valuable actually, yes. But if we continue just having all of those foods all the time, then they are not healthy. And I have to say, again, unless you eat out 3 times a day, and you have only like kind of this processed, ready-made kind of vegan meals, you are going to cook yourself. And then you are still getting, more fruits and vegetables than most omnivores. So on a balance, yes, it is. I can only say on an individual basis, it depends on what they are having. But overall, I think they are good. They are, we need them.
Excellent, absolutely. I want to go back to your master's degree. Yeah, again, I'm intrigued. Was this a particularly vegan, whole food, plant-based focused education? Or when you went through that master's degree from a nutritional standpoint, were you still hearing a lot of the kind of the quote unquote the kind of mainstream nutritional advice? What kind of education was it from that standpoint?
Well, it was a master's degree at UCL, which is like a non-vegan kind of university, and not a single tutor was vegan. And even in the class, I remember there were like 100 students, and once the discussion came about veganism, and the tutor asked, "So, is there any vegan, among you?" And I was the only one who raised their hand. So, and later I found that there were a few vegetarians, and it is interesting because whoever would, talk to me, they would say, "Oh, good for you that you are vegan." So it was almost like, people knew at some level that, being vegan is good. I don't know if it was good just in general or for health or for the environment, but people felt like, it is the next step. But at the same time, I was the only vegan. And I heard so many of those myths. And actually, I had to make a formal complaint, because we were working on a project with fellow students, and I can't remember what the topic was exactly, but we were going to include animal products. And I said, no way, I don't want that. The video I'm going to make, especially because it is going to stay here, I don't want my name to be on a video which, presents animal products. And so I got in this, kind of a bit of an argument with a fellow student. And another student intervened, and we agreed just to talk about vegetables and leave out animal products. But I did take it further, and I complained, because I just thought, we are talking about diversity and inclusivity, and veganism is a belief system. So I shouldn't be actually hiding my veganism. So I should be able to say I'm vegan, and because of that, they should respect me. So anyway, yes, that happened, and there was another discussion with another tutor, and she had like a slides talking about different nutrients, and the vegan diet was at the end, saying that it lacked all the nutrients. So I had to complain, and I actually wrote an email to her, and she was kind of trying to defend herself and saying, no, that's not what she meant. And
Oh, really?
And then there was another tutor. I didn't complain about that one, but he talked about protein complementing. That basically the way he put it was like only well-off vegans can afford to be healthy vegans, because it is expensive to be vegan and it requires a lot of planning. And so yes, I had a lot of these moments. I actually kept a document of all these incidents. I don't know what I'm going to do with them, but I just felt like, I'm going to forget about them later. So it's good to write them down.
Sounds like you could write a book of them. Just your experiences there. There's plenty of them. It's fascinating. I'm interested that you mentioned there that in a couple of those occasions, particularly when one of the lecturers there put up that slide and you went and challenged it, that they almost sort of said, well, that's not what I meant, rather than trying to double down on it. So do you think on some level there was an acceptance that veganism could potentially be, when well planned, etc., all the caveats that we have to put on it, would be a good nutritional sort of nutritionally complete diet? Do you think there was an acceptance of that at some level?
Maybe, yes, but at the same time, I think if I would have taken it any further, they could have gotten into trouble, because so at some level they know that actually a vegan diet saying that it lacks all the nutrients. It is okay if they say it lacks B12, and it might be difficult to get iodine, for example, on a vegan diet, but just saying, putting a cross on all the nutrients, you just can't do that. I think so. In a way, she knew that actually she is misrepresenting the data, or the science.
Oversimplifying it almost because there were, I guess, because there wasn't going to be any pushback, or so she thought. Obviously, there was. I want to, be remiss of me not to ask you some nutritional questions, and whilst I've got somebody with such immense knowledge on this subject. So you mentioned their B12 and obviously iodine. I think for most folks listening, obviously, with B12 supplements, etc., is kind of probably the one that's talked about the most in sort of folks who are transitioning into veganism. But is there some others that to watch out for, do you think, in terms of your planning of a sort of successful diet from a nutritional standpoint? You mentioned iodine there. Is that one, and whereabouts would you go about getting that kind of supplement?
Well, iodine is actually, we need it in really small amounts, and but it is important. And in the UK, most people actually get it from dairy kind of milk, and not because milk has iodine. It's just because of the way they clean, and the way they clean their equipment while milking. So they use an iodine solution, and that's why there's a bit of iodine in the milk. So that's how most people in the UK get their iodine. Now there are you find iodine in various amounts in plant foods, but people can just to be on the safer side, they can just take a supplement, just a small dose of 150 microgram per day. That's enough. Or again, people who use salt, you can just buy iodized salt. And actually most countries like in the US and Canada, they actually get their iodine from iodized salt. And that's the way I get my own iodine. You don't need a huge amount, just half a teaspoon is enough. And I think most people use more than that anyway in their food. So that would be one. But another one which is quite important, and it has been in the news a lot, is vitamin D. And I think, again, that's not just for vegans, that's for everybody. We live in the UK, and today, for example, I don't know where you are, but it was really grey here today. So there wasn't a lot of sunshine, and that is where we get our vitamin D, from sunshine. So when there isn't enough sunshine, and when we are not going out, actually, so it's not enough to have sunshine, you have to actually go out to be exposed to sun. So, and the NHS recommends that everybody take actually a vitamin D supplement, from October to March. And yeah, vegans, obviously it applies to vegans as well. So that is another one. Apart from that, to be honest, I don't think there is any supplement vegans need to take unless they eat a lot of processed foods. And the reason I'm saying that is just processed foods are high in omega-6. And omega-6 competes with omega-3. So if you're having more omega-6, your body is absorbing less omega-3. So then maybe taking an omega-3 supplement would be good. But again, you can easily just have flaxseed, chia seeds, walnuts every day, and that would cover your daily, requirement. But yeah, that is it. Apart from that, it's really about having a good balanced diet. I usually try not to say balanced because what balanced means to me is probably not the same as, to somebody else. Like, before going vegan, I had probably 2 pieces of fruit every day, and I thought I was having a balanced diet. Now I have just 6 pieces of fruit for my breakfast, and that is a balanced diet for me. So, it really depends on how you define a word. But yeah, in general, if you make sure to eat lots of fruits and vegetables every day, then yes, you get enough, nutrients. And yeah. But B12 obviously is very important, and you will be surprised. I still meet vegans who don't take B12. And
Right.
even if you are trying to get it, from foods, from fortified foods, which is okay, I do that myself. But it is a good idea to, from time to time, supplement it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, like you say, you see more, particularly if you have a lot of plant-based milks, you see a lot of them as supplemented, etc. But yeah, I think for me, I've always thought I'm never sure of the quantities, what I'm going to absorb. So just have a supplement and then away I'll go, sort of thing. I don't need to worry so much. It would be remiss of us not to cover the protein question. You mentioned it earlier, so we may as well get into it, because I know whilst there's many people who are well versed in veganism who listen to this, there's also some people transitioning in. So it'd be good to cover that question off whilst we've got you.
So the protein question. First of all, our society is so obsessed with protein. It is just like kind of, if you add the label protein to, like to any food, it sells better. Honestly, it does. And
Yeah.
I mean, it is probably a marketing strategy, and they have done quite a good job at it. I meet people who have just started going to the gym, and the first question they ask is, what protein powders do I need? None. That is the answer. As simple as that. Now, I mean, I'm not going to go into how many essential and non-essential amino acids are. Amino acids, are like kind of the building blocks. And we need protein. I'm not downplaying the role of proteins in our diet, because some people say that, plant-based health professionals in general downplay the importance of protein. I'm not doing that. We do need protein. But the whole idea is that, we have 9 essential amino acids which we need to take in our diet. Now, we know that single plant protein sources, they don't have the 9 essential amino acids. So they have them, but in varying degrees. For example, I don't know, maize is low in tryptophan, which is one of the essential amino acids, and pea protein is a good one, has all the essential amino acids, but it is low in methionine, for example. So that is how it is. Like, they might have 2 or 3 amino acids in good amount, but 1 or 2 in lesser amount. And that is what has actually created the protein complementing myth, which says that we need to combine protein sources at the same meal to get all the 9 essential amino acids. So, and this is not true. As long as we consume different sources of plant protein throughout a day, this way we get all the 9 essential amino acids. So it doesn't need to happen at one meal. So, which is the protein complementing myth, which ask us to do that. And that was actually, the myth was dispelled in the 1990s. And the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, says in their recommendation in 2016, so that is just recently, again, that, as long as those following a plant-based diet consume a variety of different plant protein sources in a day, not at a meal, then they get enough, protein. They get enough essential amino acids, because our body is very good. Proteins are broken down in amino acids, and then they are reassembled and made into new proteins, whatever the body requires. So yes, we get enough protein on a vegan diet. In fact, studies have shown that we are all, no matter what your diet is, we are all getting more than the recommended intake. I think omnivores, those following an omnivore diet, they get 200 their recommended intake. Vegans get about 70 to 100% more than required. So, we don't really need to worry about it. Yes, maybe elderly people who have trouble eating or swallowing, they have other conditions going on, they need to pay attention. But for the general public, not at all.
Well, there you go. Absolute education there. Even though I've been vegan for some time, there's definitely some things there that have stood out for me. The bit around compound proteins versus, and where you get your amino acids, and the fact that you can just eat them throughout the day, I think is great knowledge for anybody. Absolutely.
And I would like to add that, again, because I want to say that because I meet people who say, oh God, I lack energy, so maybe I need more protein. What they don't realize is that actually carbohydrates are their main energy source for humans. So that is where we get our fuel. So if you lack energy, it's probably you're not consuming enough calories. And again, I'm sure you have heard a lot of plant-based doctors saying, as long as you are consuming enough calories, you are getting enough protein. What they mean is that if you are consuming enough calories, enough food, you get the energy you need and the protein you need. And a lot of people, again, when they lack energy, they assume they lack protein. But that's not true. They need more calories, probably, just calories. And what people who take protein powders don't realize is that if you're not consuming enough carbohydrates and you're taking protein powders, that protein is actually going to be burned as fuel. And it is not a clean fuel because it has some nasty byproducts which you don't want to have. So make sure that you are consuming enough carbohydrates, enough calories in form of carbohydrates first. And usually with that, you would also get enough protein.
Fantastic bit of knowledge. On that note, I'd love to cover off with you things like the keto diets and so on. There's obviously this, like you said, there's a tremendous obsession with protein, and similarly, there's this also equally as tremendous fear of carbohydrates. And we've seen in recent years like a real kind of rise in these kind of keto diets and things like this, and at the extreme end, obviously very unvegan, these kind of carnivore diets and this kind of stuff. What's the, from your perspective, from a nutritional standpoint, and whether it's vegan or not, just thinking about the kind of keto, what's your kind of view of those diets from a health perspective?
To be honest, I don't even know why they get so much kind of attention in the media, because, and again, when you talk to nutritionists, and it doesn't matter if they are vegan or non-vegan, and that is actually one of the things I liked when I was studying at UCL, although I got to hear all those kind of, what do I call it, vegan myths, what was interesting is that actually none of my tutors support the keto diet. And I think,
Right.
it is just the media and probably, good marketing. I don't know what they are trying to do, is that people believe that a keto diet is a good idea, because even non-vegan nutritionists agree it is not healthy, and we shouldn't actually kind of, follow a keto diet. I mean, the percentage of fat they are having. I should have mentioned actually one of the things I did to kind of cure my migraines is actually a low-fat whole food plant-based diet. And although I'm a very physically active person, my fat intake is actually less than 15%. So I would argue that, we don't just need so much fat. And I don't know, again, saying that carbohydrates, we should limit our carbohydrates, whereas most of our energy comes from carbohydrate, So it's like one of those things I can't explain. I think it's just clever marketing, really, like protein.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's definitely in people's heads that weight gain is linked to carbohydrates, and that somehow by some flip side, you eating more like protein and fat won't lead to weight gain and so on and so forth. This is sort of seeped into mainstream culture a little bit over the last few years, I think. And like you, I don't know where it's necessarily come from, other than fitness influencers on Instagram and various myths from protein companies or whatever. I'm not sure, but it's a really strange one.
I mean, carbohydrates has 4 calories per gram, whereas fat has 9 calories per gram. So that already is like a simple maths to me. Like you kind of, just do the maths and you get, which one has more calories, which one would actually make you, gain weight. I really don't understand it. And I'm obviously a proponent of a high carbohydrate diet. And I think as long as we try to get our carbohydrate from complex sources, so non-processed, like I mentioned earlier, white bread. So rather having white bread, having like kind of whole wheat, whole meal, or rye bread, as long as we get our carbohydrate from those sources, starchy carbohydrates, like kind of potatoes, sweet potatoes, all of these, then we are getting all the nutrients we need. So not just the calories, and it is more filling. And when it comes to weight loss, I know it is a bit simplified to say it like that, but it's really at the end of the day about calories in and calories out. So, and just by, yes, people can lose weight on a keto diet. I actually, before going vegan, I had a very bad diet, and I used to lose weight on a diet of donuts and muffins. And I was really just eating donuts and muffins all day. So, if I could lose weight on that diet, anybody else can lose weight on whatever they eat, as long as you are eating less calories. So I think... Yeah, go on.
No, I was just going to say, it was purely a calories in, calories out thing. You were just burning more than you were eating donuts.
Yes, exactly. And I just think, sometimes it's not necessarily about weight loss. Do you want to lose weight in a healthy way? Because yes, short term I might see results, but long term, and most of the studies, they don't follow up people. Yeah, so we don't, and most people don't even, follow that diet for long term. So we don't know if you would follow that diet for, 3-4 years, non-stop, what health effects would you see? So there is still a lot we don't know, but I just think, we always think, weight loss is a good thing. Yes, it may be, but it needs to be done in a healthy way. And just losing weight, there are some diseases which make you lose weight. So just any weight loss, we don't want just any weight loss.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you need to sort of understand where it's come from and whether it's, safe and healthy. Otherwise, you're absolutely right. There's all sorts of things that can make you lose weight, which you wouldn't necessarily want. But yeah, absolutely. Whilst we're on the subject of, excuse me, things that perpetuate in the mainstream, sugar. I'd love to talk about sugar. Obviously, today in the news in the UK, there's a whole discussion over salt and sugar taxes and so on. Love to get your perspective on that. And as a sort of aside to that as well, I've heard one of the people almost using this as a bit of a watch out when they're talking about veganism, is eating too much fruit because there's too much sugar in fruit and this kind of stuff. So I'd love to get your view on sort of sugar in Western diets, generally speaking, and this kind of sugar tax thing. And then this other piece about it being used as almost a criticism of eating too much fruit in the vegan world.
Well, I'll start with the easy one, which is the sugar in fruits. Maybe it's not the easy one, but that is the one I keep telling people a lot about. So, the sugar in fruits is actually inside the cell. We call it intracellular. So it still kind of bonds to fiber, to all the other good nutrients, call it, if you want to call it that. So that it is not the free sugar we are talking about. the added sugar. It's different. And it is interesting because if you actually, fruit juice is different. The fiber has been removed. So that is added. When we talk about the sugar in a fruit juice, then we could actually talk about the added or free sugar. But fruit in, the sugar in fruits, that's absolutely safe. So people who say, oh, I am afraid of having diabetes or developing diabetes or have diabetes and I shouldn't eat fruits, that is BS, to be honest. So I think fruits are absolutely safe. There's no reason to avoid them. But yes, added sugar, the free sugar is not good for our health. And that is the kind of sugar you want actually to avoid as much as possible. And yes, and obviously a diet high in salt is not healthy. It can cause health problems. But again, there is like a limit. You can have it to certain degrees. And I think, when news come like that, it's really about the processed foods. They are trying actually to kind of reduce the amount of processed foods people are having. And again, I'm talking about highly processed foods. And highly processed foods, and it is interesting, it doesn't matter if they are salty or sweet kind of processed foods, they usually contain both sugar and salt at the same time. Because they want to create that taste which is really pleasurable, which makes people to go back and eat them. And to get the right amount, they add, I don't know, kind of a bit of salt, a bit of sugar, a bit of oil. They know how much to add to make it really kind of enjoyable so that people go back and they want to have it. So it's really about, how can we reduce the consumption of highly processed foods. I don't know if taxation is a good idea. I don't know. I mean, we'll see.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I feel the same. I don't know whether taxation's a good idea either. I'd rather we tax the animal agriculture industry first, to be honest. But that's maybe just my personal.
Yeah,
personal
I think
preference.
it is kind of easier for them to tax those products. And one of the reasons I'm not sure if it is a good idea is because it is going to have a kind of a bigger impact on low-income communities.
Yeah.
Because again, when it comes to health in those communities, that's a completely different topic, and so much health inequity, and so just taxing those products, because those who can afford it, they are probably not having highly processed foods which are full of sugar and salt. They are having processed foods, but maybe better quality, which would mean that they have less sugar and salt. So, and even if they can afford, even if it is, more expensive. So if you want people to change their diet, just making something more expensive, I don't think that's gonna make a huge difference, to be honest. I worked in the community, in low-income communities, and what really made a difference was actually educating them. People want to learn. We always assume that people know it, but they choose not to, make that decision, but they don't. And as long as the media, again, the mainstream media, keeps bombarding them with these messages, with these confusing messages, like, one day this is good, one day that is bad, people stop making any changes. And when we stop changing, then we go back to our default mode and our default, to our old habits, basically. But if we all come out with the same message, which is, all nutritionists and dietitians agree, you need to eat more fruits and vegetables. We all agree on that. You need to eat more whole grains. So we are focusing too much on the things we shouldn't have, and that confuses people. And we should focus on what people should have more of. And also just something as simple as legumes having protein would make a big difference. Because, what I saw in the community is that, firstly, a lot of women don't like red meat, but they force themselves to have it because they feel like, they need it. So when I was telling them, no, actually, you don't need to have red meat. It's good that you are not having it. Don't have it. Don't force yourself. Nobody's actually making you have it. They were surprised. And if I would tell them, actually, legumes have enough protein, they don't need, again, to have meat for their protein, they were relieved because legumes are cheaper than meat. So I think it's really about educating the public rather than just making one product more expensive than the other. That's not going to make a difference. I don't think so, but we'll see.
No, I tend to agree with you. And when I think about you know, the price of fruit and vegetables, etc., I don't think it's, you know, it's obviously not going to go sort of down in proportion with these other foods going up. So, you know, it's not as if people are going to be able to run towards, you know, organic avocados all of a sudden. So, you know, and like you say, if there's a void of like, well, what do I do with the more affordable vegan options, the you know, legumes and the, you know, and things like this, then yeah, people will be at a bit of a loss. Like, where do I turn then? You know, because I can't, you know, the perception will be, well, I can't afford an organic avocado, and I can't afford, you know, the taxed sugar, salt, etc., full processed food. So, yeah, I think you're right. There's this piece in the middle that we all need to do to help educate. You know, I think right from a young age. I think I've got a young son of 3 years old, and you know, right from that age, I'm sort of very conscious already of what he sees us cooking, and what we get him involved with, and you know, those kind of things. What we tell him is a treat, and what we tell him is good food and bad food, and these kind of things. Because I think that, you know, it starts right from then. You know, these, like you said earlier, food is so intrinsically linked with our emotions and our memories and these kind of things. I'm sort of acutely aware that, you know, there's probably things registering in his young mind at 3 years old that he might carry with him for the rest of his life, of like, I always eat this with my dad on a Sunday, you know, that kind of stuff. So I know I've got those, so I'm trying to make those more healthier things than heavily processed stuff, you know.
True, and it is important actually to do all of that, because I think especially when kids start going to school, they are going to get all these messages from other students, you know, other children. So it's important to actually teach them now.
I'm very scared of that moment when he goes to school with lots of other kids. Suddenly we can't control the messages anymore. But never mind. C'est la vie. Leila, it's been amazing chatting with you. I've really enjoyed it. I've learned a ton. I'm sure folks who've been vegan for many years, as well as people who've just entered into the vegan curious stage, will have learnt loads as well. So I thank you for your time. It'd be great to, no problem at all. It'd be great to point some folks in the direction of where they can go about finding you, maybe contacting you, etc. Because I know you give excellent advice to folks as well.
I have a website. I have my own website, which is drleiladehghan.com. But I am actually a board member of Plant-Based Health Professionals UK. I'm also the education lead. And we have tons of, you know, kind of amazing fact sheets and information for people who want to go vegan or who are already vegan and they just want to know what to eat, what supplements to take. So we have lots of, you know, even for people who have chronic diseases and, you know, health issues, advice, you know, how to change their diet to a healthier one. So we have tons of useful information. And I work as a nutritionist at Plant-Based Health Online. So that's another website where people can find me.
Amazing. Well, I'll make sure I put all the links in the show notes as well. So for folks who are listening, who want to just click the links, head to the show notes and you should find them in there. But until next time, thank you so much, Leila.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye now.